And so, my friends, all you out there in the digital wasteland, we're back with Neoncast, number 15. Once again, it's been a little while since we've convened under these auspices, but as you may know, I haven't had as much time to do this kind of stuff recently. But also, I don't know, I've always had trouble doing things like this on a really regular basis. I mean, obviously, if I, got paid a lot of money to do it, I would figure it out. But, even like back when I was writing anime stuff, I'd have a really hard time doing weekly blogging, like blogging about each episode, because sometimes I would have stuff to say and sometimes I wouldn't. And so this is also one of the reasons that I have trouble doing regular scheduled podcasts. I don't know, sometimes I'm busy, sometimes I don't feel like I'm super on point with comments or whatever. But yeah, once again, we're rolling around to a couple of things that I want to talk about. I seem to wait until they're two interesting things kind of in sequence, and then I talk about them. And then if there's one thing that's kind of isolated, I'll maybe do something about it in shorter form, like I did for Blade Runner. I actually even recorded one about it, but I was kind of drunk, and I listened back to it later, and it just was not great. So I just junked it. But yeah, here we are with a double review of the second season of Stranger Things, and also Thor Ragnarok, which, as of the time that I'm recording this thing, I have not seen yet. I'm going to see it tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, that's also a thing that I kind of like to do, because sometimes, towards the end of maybe like an hour recording, you kind of run out of steam a little, just in terms of how interesting and how like the stuff that your brain comes up with. So it kind of is nice to break it down into like 2 segments like this, 2 days in a row or something like that. Now that I brought you into the boring process behind putting these things out, we can get to the business at hand. In fact, if I actually reviewed the first season of Stranger Things on a previous episode of the Neoncast, the number of which I don't remember right now because I'm dumb, but it's on this channel that you're on right now, and it's in the title. And obviously I loved it for many reasons, and I just brought up it partly because of this too, because apparently the stories, because it, the newer version of it, is good. I liked it. It's a little jump scary, but I thought it was good, and it was the characters were really strong, I felt, and it had a very sort of Stranger Things-ish vibe. And apparently that's, not only is it not an accident, it's actually kind of a weird double, triple incident where apparently the Duffer Brothers, who made Stranger Things, initially pitched it to studios and couldn't get it done, and so then went about doing some like original a property of theirs, which is Stranger Things, and now it comes out and kind of mimics their style of like that kind of 80s kids vibe, and I guess when they made Stranger Things, they were kind of thinking about it, which if you watch the 90s miniseries or even read the book, has that kind of friends, kid friends in the midst of this kind of, dangerous situation, kids in adult situations or whatever. And they're very kind of, the characters are really strong and interesting and unique. And so now you have like it, which is mimicking Stranger Things, which was itself sort of an homage to it, which I thought was kind of interesting. They also share an actor, the kid who plays Mike in Stranger Things. He's also in it, playing a totally different kind of character, which is a testament to that actor's abilities. We're going to get to acting in a second, but yeah, like obviously all of these kids, both in it and in Stranger Things, just a really good group of kid actors. In fact, I've noticed recently that there are a lot of like child acting seems to have stepped it up in recent years. Like I keep seeing movies with just fantastic kid actors. The Witch, for example, which has like 4 child actors ranging from Anya Taylor-Joy, who's the oldest, to like 2 kids who are very, very young. And all 4 are just fantastic. They sell it so well. And they all have to speak with like colonial English, like period accurate colonial dialogue. It's really difficult. It's not, it's not something that any of them know how to do, like, from life. They had to like learn how to speak like that. And yeah, they're just selling a really bizarre, scary story. The Witch, great movie. If you haven't seen it, I know it got praised a lot, and I know some people think it's boring, but yeah, I really liked it. Anyway, kid actors, yeah. So okay, Stranger Things 2. It's good. It's really good, I thought. And actually, someone today on Twitter, I wrote down the names of people who told me things to talk about. How about that? Someone on Twitter, Private Hudson on Twitter. And his Twitter name is super complicated to actually write out. The I in private is a 1, and then there's like an underscore, and then in Hudson there's like a 5 and a 0. Dude, I want to give you credit, but come on. He said that Stranger Things and Stranger Things 2 are kind of like Alien and Aliens, okay? And I think that's a pretty good analogy in more than one way. Some of the ways are spoilery, so we're not going to get into them yet, but I just think that even in a very abstract notion, I feel like the seasons are very close to each other in terms of quality, but they do different kinds of things. So they're good for different reasons. So let's look at Alien and Aliens for a second. Aliens, the purpose, the sort of the marketing purpose of it was like, well, the first one had one alien, so let's take it and make a bunch of aliens, right? But more so than that, the first movie is more like a suspense thriller, and the second is a little more like action, horror, sci-fi. So they tap into different sub-genres within the whole like sci-fi horror and do different things. So like where the one is, like where Alien is all about like the slow jump. Then in Aliens, it's more like the feeling of being surrounded by them and the paranoia. And then you also bring in like those colorful like marine characters and stuff. So they have different attitudes, but both are highly regarded, and both have their like devoted fan bases. People will argue about which is better, and I think that's great. I mean, that's kind of what you want, right? You want to make 2 movies that are so good in different ways that one of them doesn't just feel like a sort of a lesser copy of the other, which is a trap that so many sequels fall into. And so in that kind of way, I thought Stranger Things 2 kind of took a little bit of a different route. But that was great. I mean, it's it's what you know. It's what you know and love. It's basically a continuation of the same story with some new characters, and yes, it's stepped up in ways, it references different kinds of things. Whereas in the first season, they referenced a lot of like E.T., Goonies. Here they go for some other types of things too. But here's a really brilliant thing I think about Stranger Things, and it's references, because it's very hot now to make shows that are set in like past time periods. I mean, I guess it's always been a little bit popular, but 80s nostalgia now is like a thing. So like a lot of things are just set in the 80s, and the references can be obnoxious and on the nose. And here they toned it down a little. First of all, in the sense that. For long periods, I totally forgot that the show was set in the 80s, because they didn't keep hammering it with dumb lines of dialogue. Hey, remember that Reagan is the president? It was very subtle, and it was brought up when it needed to be brought up. So that's one element of the references. The second is when they reference things, like if they reference kind of movies or whatever, the references aren't exactly literal. It's you're still within this story, right? They established, if you watched the first season, which I assume you did if you're listening to this. I mean, I assume you watched season 2 if you're listening to this, but let's proceed as though you haven't. This idea that there's like this alternate dimension that's kind of parallel to us and is home to these horrible whatevers, all kinds of unknown horrors, kind of like maybe The Mist. And so it's still about that. It's, I don't think that ruins it to say that it's basically still about this other dimension and our dimension, right? And so the other things that they reference are all done in the context of this story. So like I'll be watching an episode and all of a sudden I'll say to myself, oh wait, I see where they're going with this. This is a reference to X, spoiler alert. But so it's not that they're doing an exact copy of something. Like it's not like I'm trying to like for instance, like they wouldn't you know what? I'm not going to say anything because I really don't want to spoil it. We're going to get to spoilers in a little bit, and then I'll get back to this idea. But I said on Twitter that Stranger Things 2 is very anime, okay, and that I would explain on this episode why I thought that it was very anime. And so there are all kinds of little subtle ways that if you don't watch anime like that, me saying this won't really mean anything. But I think a big thing that anime does a lot and other things don't do as much is adult stories of children in adult situations. So like children have to save the world. Children get, in some kind of scary or impossible or supernatural situation. And that's not something that's done a ton in Western media. Now, a little bit more. Like I said, you got your Stranger Things and your It and stuff of that nature. But I think it's a little weird because I feel like children are a really good character to build your story around. Because think of it like this. It's a shared experience that we all have. We've all been children, okay? So if your characters are children and you give them, typical or more general children problems, they like a girl, they have things in school. It's a rare example of something that, almost, aside from very rare exceptions, everybody watching the movie can sort of relate to on some level. And additionally, their experiences are heightened, like their emotions and their view of the world is a little more sharp-edged, which lends itself to like storytelling. Archetypes are a little more pronounced, and maybe emotions are a little less controlled. Which, again, like I said, a character, because, if all of your characters are stoic individuals that have this rich inner world that doesn't project outwards, then it might be really cool if you could look inside their heads. But if you're watching a movie with characters like that, it could come across as very boring. And if they don't know how to convey that inner turmoil, then it has no effect. And so having your characters be slightly exaggerated actually works well in terms of conveying stories in like visual media, right? In a book where you can describe what's going on inside you can verbalize a character's inner monologue, then you don't need that. But yeah, so like I feel like that's a good reason why stories with children can be very impactful, both in the breadth of their appeal and in the sort of the strength of the strength you can imbue to characters because of like how extreme their emotions can get and how sort of close to the surface they are. And anime does this a lot, and I think Stranger Things is a really good example of this. Like, it's children in adult situations, and the adults are also with them. Like, it's a thing, I remember saying this in my review of the first season. I loved that they did not waste a lot of time where the adults don't believe the kids, that something's happening. They really quickly dispatched with that notion. Very quickly, it was like, okay, so there's a really weird, bizarre, supernatural thing going on here, and we're going to have to figure it out. Like, it wasn't, because I find that to be a really overused cliche, the idea of like something's going on, but nobody believes our hero. Here they were like, nah. Let's just get to the point where very quickly they get to the point where everybody has already seen proof that this shit is real. And so now the mission is to address it, right? Because it's almost as though there's this like weird unspoken truth that like if the grown-ups only knew that the ghost was real, then the problem would be solved. And yet Stranger Things is a great example of that not happening. Like, even when the parents and the police all know that something's going on, that's still not enough to solve the problem. And the same thing kind of happens here too. And I guess we can kind of transition into spoilers. I obviously, after that, I'm going to insert like a cut, and then I'm going to go to my Thor Ragnarok review that I'm going to record tomorrow. So look at the description under this video, and I'm going to put a time code. And you can skip to the after the spoilers. It's probably going to be time coded for like Thor spoilers too. Like sometimes I do. I don't know. I mean, I like I said, there's no set format for this crap. Like I've been winging it. I have a little piece of paper here with like 5 lines scribbled on it, most of which I already mentioned. And so, yeah. So let's take a little like breather break, and we're going to talk spoilers. So, like I said, I don't really go into plot. Like I don't go into plot descriptions when I do spoilers. Like I'm not gonna just tell you what happened because we've all watched it, I presume. So we can just kind of get into it. I really enjoyed like I said, when I was talking about references. Okay, so like in the first season, they reference a lot of Amblin stuff, E.T., Goonies. I've said this before. Here, there was a lot of like aliens. I did mention aliens before, but it's sort of in a non-spoilery way. There's also a spoilery sense in which it references aliens, which is, the obvious way, which is like there's a lot of monsters and they have this lair and they ambush people there, and there's like a queen, and it's very aliens. But they also do stuff like haunting, like not possession, like exorcism kind of movies, because Will is possessed by this like smoke demon kind of character. And as I was saying in the non-spoilery section, the references are there. It's clearly referencing, like The Exorcist or something like that, but not in the sense that he's possessed by a ghost. It's all tied into this one story. And so the reference is only sort of in the visual sense, where all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is kind of like he's possessed by the devil. Or like the scene in the caverns where they all go down and then the demo dogs attack them. That's very aliens, but not literal. It's just, it kind of, I was watching that scene and then you see that map and you see the little dots moving towards them. And I was like, oh, they're doing an aliens thing. Ah, that's cute. Like, I liked it. I didn't think it wasn't obnoxious. It was fun. It's done lovingly. That's the thing. It doesn't feel like it's riding on all of these visuals because it doesn't have an identity of its own. It really has an identity of its own. It really feels like this is, again, a sort of a cliche term, but it does feel like a love letter to these kinds of things, where it really wants you to have that moment. Like, I feel like the moment I'm having, that moment of realization of what they're referencing, is exactly the thing they're aiming for. And I hope so, because if so, it's a really cool way to do things like that, and I think it achieves the desired effect. The child actors, as I said, are really great, and Will's actor does some serious level acting in this movie. I mean, really, in this season. Just the flailing and the screaming and the changing of the personalities, really, really quite good. And I also think Winona Ryder just excels again in this season. And just in general, I also talked about this on Twitter about how, there's this all like focus on strong female characters now. And I really feel like she's a great example of someone who is sort of goes against so many regular tropes and things that would like diminish her. It would be like where a lot of like more hacky or less clever shows would have had her character be way more mundane and way less strong. And I love the fact that she she's just determined to save him, and she seems, I mean, she's upset obviously, but she's unfazed by the things that she needs to do. She's like, oh, I got to go into another dimension and kill a monster to get my son. Okay, sure. Let me grab my keys. Like, that's, and I like, and so obviously she's upset and scared and, like as anybody would be, but like the idea that she's like, oh no, I'm going to go fight the government and monsters in another dimension. And a smoke demon that can control minds that I can't even see or know anything about. No, I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna kill it because I love my son. I'm a mother, and like I love that she's And they do a little thing in this season, like, you know how in the first season she does the Christmas lights thing in her house, and here they do the thing where he draws the tunnels and they got it like taped all over the house. Again, I like that idea that she will indulge all of this stuff because she knows that she's, her ultimate goal is to save him from this situation, and where so many other people would just like crumple and be unable to handle this. She's just like, okay, tell me what I got to do. Tell me what I got to kill a 50-foot monster, with my teeth. Okay, I'm good. And I really like that. And she plays it so well. I mean, it's just really cool. And David Harbour, again, really great in this, and his relationship with Millie Bobby Brown with Eleven, who's also very good. And also her whole arc in both seasons, by the way, is one of the reasons I say Stranger Things is very anime. The idea of this like mysterious girl with superpowers who kind of stumbles into the lives of like a group of regular kids, and with her brings like a big like supernatural adventure. That's classic anime. Like, just give her waist length silver hair and purple eyes, and you got yourself a fucking anime. And I'm not there people are divided on that episode where she goes and meets her sister who's in charge of a group of punk robbers, like in the Warriors or something. I didn't love it. I liked that it paid off. I liked that it had a point and wasn't just a backdoor, like feeler for maybe we're going to do a spinoff. You want to see a spinoff? Fear the Stranger Things. We're going to, Fear the Stranger Things. It's our spinoff about, what's her name? 8 or 9 or 6. I don't remember what number she is. The one who can make you see shit. And so, that episode was kind of whatever, but it did serve its purpose ultimately. And it did, like I said, the things that it set up then paid off as well. I also feel like, I know that they're saying they're planning 4 seasons in, as a whole, and like having it end after season 4. And I do feel like maybe they really sat down and wrote like a 3-season arc, because there were things here that were deliberately set up and not paid off yet. Which again is good. I don't like winging it. If you have something planned and it's like a long-term thing, that's fine. I'll wait a couple of years, 3 years to find out what the little thing you put in here is. But as long as you know that you're not just throwing it in there to be weird and mysterious and obscure lost, and actually have a point. Yeah. What else? The music was great as always. The whole way the story was built, and the various characters, and it's funny, and I really like that the characters are moving forward. Like Steve's character, I think, is really interesting because they started him off as like he's the bully boyfriend of he's the kid's older sister has a boyfriend, and he's the guy with the slick back hair, and he's the cool kid at school. And now he's much more interesting than that, and more layered and more nuanced. And by the way, that's another thing that anime does. Not just anime. I'm not gonna be unfair, but like the idea of where somebody starts as a total trope, like a total like 2D superficial trope, and slowly it's revealed that there's way more to this character than that. I really like that. I think that's a really clever way to address tropes, is to start it off with the trope and then say you misjudged this person because you thought he had the slick back hair and the Trans Am, but he's actually a good person or whatever. You understand what I'm saying. And Nancy, by the way, another really good female character, I thought, that is I'm sure some aspects of her maybe annoy feminists or whatever, because, there's the whole like boys and blah, blah, blah. But like, I really liked that she was like, oh no, my friend was fucking murdered by these people, and I'm going to take that. Like, I don't care that they threatened me. I'm going to fucking ruin this place. Like, her parents are going to wonder for the rest of their lives whether or not their daughter is out there somewhere. No, fuck that. And like, I like that she was really determined, and she, and in many instances where like easily the pretty girl in a show would just like back down, she's like right there. I like that. And the same goes for 11, and the same goes for what's her face, Mad Max. Like, they have really interesting female characters here, even though some of them have some tropey elements, because some of the male characters have some tropey elements too. You know, they're geeks and they strike out with the ladies and, you know, all that crap. It's fine. Some people in the real world do have cliche attributes to them. You know, some jocks really are dumb jocks, and some pretty girls who are blonde and have high heels are just dumb bimbos. There are people like that. Obviously not everyone, and obviously tons and tons of people, you know, break those stereotypes. But like, if one of the characters in your show happens to have one aspect to their character that corresponds to a trope of that character, that doesn't immediately like disqualify your character. That could just be one aspect of them. You know what I mean? Like, I think that actually adds to the nuance of a character, because it says even the tropes, like even a person you see and you think, oh, I've seen a person like that a million times before, even that person probably has parts to their personality that kind of defy your expectations. And on that note, I think I might be sort of done talking about Stranger Things 2. Like I said, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was 9 episodes, and they didn't feel the need to like stretch it out because of, I don't know why, because they have to do 10 or they have to do 13, like fucking Marvel do with their Netflix shows. You know, they packed 9 with a great a great amount of content, and that's what it needed. And that's about it. So I'm about to put in a little, you know, break point here, and then we will jump forward in time and talk about Thor Ragnarok, and also talk about What We Do in the Shadows, which I saw recently in preparation for Thor Ragnarok, the movie directed by New Zealander director Taika Waititi, who also directed Thor Ragnarok. Spoiler alert, I loved What We Do in the Shadows. I thought it was fan-fucking-tastic, and it made me really excited about the humor in Thor, because I'm not a big comedy guy, and yet I watched that movie and I laughed uproariously for a lot of it. And it was also really well made. Aside from being because it's, you know, it's kind of a lowish budget mockumentary, but it has some really interesting filmmaking. But I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, because I think it would be good to perhaps compare and contrast things with that and Thor, which I would have seen by the time I record that. Let's do it. And here we are, back after this break. It's been about 24 hours. In fact, it's a little later than I intended, because I had to restart my computer, and, you know, it was one of those times where you restart your computer and it's 2.5 hours later and it's finally done doing whatever updates or whatever other bullshit it needed to restart itself for. And so we're about 2.5 hours later, and like, I don't know, 3 whiskeys in, more than I intended. But I'm going to make it work somehow anyway. So yeah, I went to see Thor Ragnarok today, and I'm going to talk a little about it. I'm not going to talk about it that much, I think. I'll see how this goes. I mean, it's not a movie to dissect. We're gonna come back around to this point. This is not a movie to dissect. This is a movie to enjoy, because I think the word fun is a really good one-word review of it. And I do think that it applies even in a more sort of general way than maybe some other movies that people call fun. So let's take a step back and aside for a second. As I mentioned before the break, I'd recently watched What We Do in the Shadows, Taika Waititi's mockumentary about vampires living in New Zealand. And I really liked it, and I really liked the comedic style of it. I had not watched Flight of the Conchords, but and also I'm not exactly a huge fan of that sort of style of like awkward comedy. I'm not sure what to call it exactly. And also, I'm also not a huge consumer of comedy. Like, I don't go out and I try to find funny things to watch. I think I've also mentioned this on this podcast before. The comedies that I like need to have something else to them. Meaning, if you take out the comedic element, there is something else there. It's a horror movie. It's a science fiction movie. It's an action movie. If your comedy movie has a comedy premise, like, I don't know, Liar Liar. That's just off the top of my head, a comedy that has a comedy premise. I even think I kind of sort of enjoyed-ish that movie when I first watched it. I watched it once and many years ago, so I don't even remember. But I'm just saying, that movie has a comedy element, like a comedy plot. A guy who's a lawyer who lies a lot now can't tell a lie for a day. That's a comedy premise. Okay? Zombieland doesn't have a comedy premise. It has a horror. It has like a post-apocalypse horror premise. Or Deadpool doesn't have a comedy premise. It has a superhero premise. And so what we do in the shadows has a double premise to it. It's a mockumentary, so its premise is that it's a documentary about vampires. And so it has like it has two competing elements to it. One of them being the mockumentary style, which obviously has been done extremely well by people like Christopher Guest and also by Rob Reiner, because, Spinal Tap, which was written by Christopher Guest, was not directed by him. But, he did Best in Show. And also there's all sorts of other sort of standouts in the sort of mockumentary genre. But, yeah, so I'm not a big consumer of comedy. So it took me a while to sit down and watch it. I actually only watched it because of Thor, because I said, okay, they gave it to this comedy director, and it's supposedly going to be very funny and jokey. And so, I wanted to check it out. And I ended up just loving it. It's just hilarious. And like I said, also well made. It has some really clever things in it. It has clever storytelling and clever filmmaking. And it made me excited about this. And, it ended up being even more so his style than I thought. Because the one thing that I think I was most surprised by at the end of this was how much they let him make it his own movie. And I said to my friend that I watched the movie with that this is the Ant-Man movie that Marvel did not let Edgar Wright make. Because Edgar Wright left Ant-Man over creative differences with Marvel. Apparently they were trying to pull him more to the center, and and they wanted all kinds of like Marvel Universe tie-ins, and Edgar Wright wanted to do his own Edgar Wright thing, and so it didn't work out. And I think that if you watch Thor Ragnarok, you will see a movie where clearly Marvel Studios let Taika Waititi do what he wanted. And the result is something very un-Marvel, but I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that in the sense that if they were still operating under the old system with Ike Perlmutter or whoever it was that was pushing back against Edgar Wright in those early days, there's a maturity there now on Marvel's part, I think. And I also attribute that to more than one circumstance. For example, this is the third Thor movie. And the first two Thor movies were neither huge commercial successes nor huge fan favorites. Particularly not Thor: The Dark World. But Thor is super popular. And Chris Hemsworth, everybody loves Chris Hemsworth as Thor. He has really sort of come to embody that character in exactly the same way that, you know, Robert Downey Jr. is the Iron Man that we all know now. And I think Marvel smartly realized that there was potential to try to mine this character for another movie, and I also think it was smart of them to come at it from like a perspective of, look, we might as well try something different, right? We went for the sort of obvious tone for the first two Thor movies, where the focus was like serious, Asgard and universe-ending things, and then have a little Joss Whedon-y touches of funniness in it. And here they kind of went the opposite and made it very funny and jokey with touches of that kind of serious gravitas tone. And it works. It works really well. And if you go listen to the video that I made about the trailer for Thor Ragnarok, you will see that I said there that I think the tone of it is very clever because the next time we're going to see Thor, it's going to be an Infinity War, and we're going to have Thanos and space things, and we're going to have the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers all coming together, and we kind of needed a transitional stage between those two things. And I think this really gave it to us in a good way, both tonally and in terms of like the universe. Because as I said, we have Thor and we have Hulk. They've been on Earth and they've done Avengers things, and now both of them have been off in space doing space things. And also, like I said, tonally, in terms of combining this weird, funny, crazy universe with a slightly more serious Captain America, you know, at Peggy Carter's bedside as she's dying of old age, crying, you know, like kind of marry those two things. Tony Stark realizing that the Winter Soldier murdered his parents, even though he's now supposed to be friends with him. These things are very far in terms of the spectra of emotion, right? And so we needed some kind of bridge movie, and I feel like this really functioned well as that bridge movie. And so I think they even they decided they were going to try something different, and it really worked. And really feels oddly, you know, when I reviewed Blade Runner, when they were making Blade Runner, Denis Villeneuve said that it was going to be the most expensive indie movie ever made. And, you know, it's true that movie really feels like a $200 million indie movie. And to a certain extent, so does Thor Ragnarok. I don't know what its budget is offhand, but it really does feel, I said today on Twitter that I saw things in this movie that I have only seen in like micro budget artsy or indie movies, where like some kind of line of dialogue or a take or a facial expression was so funny that they kept it in, even though it was wrong, even though there are lots of mistakes in this movie that he just kept in because they were funny or weird. And it happens a lot. Like this movie on some level is an out of control mess, but it works, and it's so funny and charming. Like he has such an eye, I think, for comedy, because I've heard and I've read that a lot of it is improvised, that he encourages improvisation, but I think there's more to that than just telling your actors, oh, just wing it. I think it's very important also to know which of the things work and which of the things work with which things. And I do think that Waititi has a really good eye for which of his like funny takes work and also finding ones that work for weird reasons. Like I said, some of this stuff, some of the delivery and some of the reaction shots are wrong. They're, quote unquote wrong. They're not the thing that's technically is supposed to be happening there, but it all works. He has a skill for this, and this is also true in what we do in the shadows in a big way. There's a lot of very real in its awkward unslickness, and it happens here too. And so I guess I can get into spoilers a little. I don't know. I mean, do I even want to talk about spoilers? You know what? Screw it. Most of my comments about this are just general anyway. So I'm just going to say that I feel like this might be a really controversial Marvel movie because it's really jokey, it's really funny, and again, it really is very much a Taika Waititi style movie rather than a Marvel style movie. But I would much rather have something that's this outside the box than something that is entirely inside the box. We've already had that. Do we really want another Iron Man 3, another Thor the Dark World? Why? Just give me different. Give me interesting. Give me special. Don't give me inside the box. Not anymore. I've had enough inside the box, and some of it is just great. But I think we're graduating to the point where inside the box just will not cut it anymore. So that brings me to my initial point, I think, which was that this is not a movie to nitpick. This is a movie to enjoy, because when a movie is this fun, when a movie is this enjoyable and charming and just, like I said, a big, dumb spectacle of entertainment, then its flaws and its little, like the seams that show and the little bit of the rough edges, they don't matter. It's just fun. It's lovable. And on that note, I'm going to end. I just have one thing that I owed someone to talk about. I promised Mr. Farrow on Twitter that I would say something about Wonder Woman, because I did not do a video or a Neoncast about Wonder Woman. And just to say that I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was... I thought it did what maybe Superman should have done. And now I know that the tone of DC and DC v Marvel has become this big tribalist, angry thing. And I defended Man of Steel when it came out, but I have kind of shifted on it a little. It's complicated and it's a long story, and I don't want to get into it. But I'm just saying that the thing I liked about Wonder Woman is that I liked that it was a very sort of optimistic and a positive without being unfun or uncool. And I also thought it was really clever how they managed to make her character very idealist and naive without being stupid. She was naive because she didn't understand our social codes and stuff. But in so many instances of that, the way they play it is that the person is dumb. What do you mean you shake their hand? I want to sniff their ass. It's not like she can be awkward and not understand like customs without being an idiot, because she isn't. She's very smart. And I thought that was really cool. That was something I really don't remember seeing a lot done ever. And, credit to that. And yeah, it was fun. It had some really cool action. I thought Gal Gadot, who is, not historically not a great actress, I thought Patty Jenkins really tapped into something with her. And also I think she's improving. I would not put it past her that she's maybe really working on her craft and trying to improve herself, and fucking good for her. Like, I think she really knocks it out of the park. Like, she really impressed me. I thought she might have a hard time carrying a movie as a main actress, and she really rose to the occasion. And like I said, good for her. Fucking, I remember her when she was just an Israeli beauty queen. Like, I guess, am I supposed to have some kind of national pride for her? I guess I do a little bit. Like, it is nice to see someone who's unabashedly Israeli or whatever and succeeding on this level. And yeah, I'm going to see Justice League in a couple of weeks. And, she's the thing that I'm sort of kind of excited to see more of at this point. Like, there's other things that I'm sure is going to be fun to see more of, like Batman and Alfred and stuff. But yeah, like, her stuff was so entertaining and fun, and yeah, it was just like a regular. It wasn't an outstanding or standout-y movie, but it was very solid. And on the whole, if we're gonna talk, on the level of stuff like diversity and feminism and women's empowerment, I think the fact that it succeeded like this is good, both in terms of the fact that, if a little girls love Wonder Woman and have a Wonder Woman movie like that, that's great. I also think it maybe helps combat the assumption that somehow society's not ready for a female protagonist. Because again, this keeps happening, and for some reason, this was maybe the one movie that finally broke that barrier. And by that I mean, because it has happened before. Movies starring women, even in this genre, like Alien or Kill Bill, have done very well. But I think this was maybe the first time that, like, it did well enough and was so scrutinized because of comic book movies and all that crap, and also because it had a female director and stuff, so that its success really resonated with that kind of general perception, meaning like people now look at that as like, aha, women protagonists don't scare away viewers, and I think they never have really. I think it's just a matter of doing good things and doing them well, and if they're done well and they're the right franchises and they're I keep saying this over and over and on everything, do whatever you want. Just do it as well as you possibly can. And I do believe that things tend to work out when that happens. I mean, obviously Blade Runner is not a good example because it did not do well financially. But you know what? I think it's going to do gangbusters on home release. Like, I really think it's going to be a movie that's going to make Sony money for many years to come. So, I don't think they made a lot of money because, the original Blade Runner was not a huge moneymaker, but that property has become a big moneymaker along the years. And, a movie can do really well, like be like a flash in the pan in the theater and like not survive in consciousness. Avatar, for example. And so, yeah, like I said, I think like in 10 years, if you look at the income maybe that Blade Runner is going to make over the next 10 years, I think that at some point it is going to rise above the level of a lot of other movies that did better than it did in their cinematic run. But yeah, I do think there's going to be many people who are going to be passionate fans of this movie of that movie for many years. But yeah, just generally speaking, like, make a good movie. If you make a good, solid movie, if you write it well and if you cast it well and stuff, then yeah, even if it has a female protagonist or maybe a black protagonist like Black Panther, like I have a feeling Black Panther is going to do really well because it looks good. So That's the message, you know. And on that note, we are going to end this episode 15 of the Neoncast. I am Neon Taster, on Twitter at Neon Taster. The Twitter account of the podcast is at Neoncast. And as always, you can hear these podcasts and more things on this YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/neontaster. And the Twitch streams, I did one last night for the first time in forever, and I might do some more. I want to get new games. I want to maybe get some more back into it and stuff. That would be twitch.tv/neontaster. And also, if you want to write me something that's longer than a tweet of any kind of sort or whatever, neoncastpod@gmail.com. I am Neon Taster. This is the Neoncast. Thanks for listening. If you have been listening, and if not, then why am I talking to you?